I've had the honor of interviewing James Hill and Janelle about their musical journeys and how they met and how they created the mega world of ukulele called Uketropolis, where all teachers can come and share their experiences and help each other out with teaching kids and enriching them with the wonderful world of music. The only thing is that the file was corrupt on my end. Everything just completely broke down. The only time it has ever happened in any of my interviews, and unfortunately it didn't even happen when I could just go back and record again like in my narrative episode. So I hope you still enjoy. James and Anne's voices are stellar because we had their recording on their end, but mine is a little bit cringy. So I hope you still are able to receive the amazing insights that they bring to us about the importance of music and how it can help our children grow into better, more balanced people.
Very special guests join Changemakers today, both award-winning musicians and UBC graduates, James Hill and Janelle, who have traveled all over the world not only to perform, but to bring education to teachers on how to bring music literacy to students in the best, most engaging way possible. Under the James Hill Ukulele Initiative, which after a decade has become the mega Uketropolis world that they have created together, where teachers and students from countries like Japan, Germany, Australia, the US, their home country, Canada, and others are taking this one-of-a-kind specialized teacher training program to be the best teachers ever. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Mai.
Thanks, Mai. Happy to be here.
It's good to have you. Could you tell us, what is Uketropolis exactly?
Uketropolis is, it's an imaginary city where everybody plays the ukulele and everybody gets along, and music is like water. So, I mean, what it really is the amalgamation of several threads that I started many years ago. So what Uketropolis did was it brought together the projects that I'd worked on for a decade into one place, and now we have one community that is really thriving.
And what need is it filling, especially the teacher training program? I mean, teachers can go on YouTube and learn, the C chord and that kind of thing. What makes the Jihui, as we call it, program different?
I think the best answer for that is for teachers to go on YouTube and just spend some time there. And you will see very quickly that it's a bit of a dog's breakfast. Like it's hard to find what you want. It's hard to find material that really speaks to your students. YouTube is an amazing wonder of the world, but it is heavily influenced toward the game of getting followers and getting eyeballs on your advertisements and monetizing your videos. And it's somewhere in that storm of influences and factors, somewhere in there is the content that you want, but it's like trying to, run through a swarm of bees every time you want a little bit of honey. It's like, I'm just going to buy a jar of honey. And buying a jar of honey without having to go through the swarm of bees, that's the training that I'm offering. It's somewhere else. It comes from a history of 3 generations of teachers who have worked in the classroom. It's not just me. This is, this is wisdom that has been passed down for generations. Uketropolis is ad-free. It's more like a library. You go in there and it's a peaceful, calming place where people are genuinely interested in sharing good information, wisdom, and experience. That's a very different thing from YouTube. YouTube is not a classroom, and the best way to find that out is to go and spend some time on YouTube.
Yeah, I mean, I decided to take the Jihui training myself. I went all the 3 levels, and we used to meet in Vancouver, and you also did it in Toronto, and of course other countries. Now it's all online. How is that change feeling?
Well, it's a big change, but it's also a change that everyone is experiencing right now. So the funny thing is, we had planned to bring the JHUI certification program into an online format before we even knew what COVID was. So we had always planned to do that. And then once COVID hit, it almost made it look like we were sort of clairvoyant or something.
Well, you sort of were.
You kind of were accidentally clairvoyant to start that process last November, because it takes a long time to pivot these things. There's a lot of rethinking and reworking that has to go into having an online program that used to be an in-person program. So, I mean, first of all, we launched it 1st of July. It's gone really well. I'm really happy with it. And, but it was a ton of work. And I think that the payoff to that is that we're able to access so many more people who couldn't afford to fly to Vancouver or to Toronto. The accessibility of it is increased a lot. Also, the price of it has come down. The ability to connect with fellow teachers has increased. And I think that it's like, sending our son to school. One of the things that we love about his classroom is what happens outside the classroom. It's almost like being in the classroom is the excuse to learn what you really want to learn, which is in the hallways and on the playground. And I think Uketropolis now gives us the forum to do that. Yeah, they've got their courses. Yes, they've got their assignments. They've got their lectures. But it's everything that happens outside of that and around that is where the real sharing and learning takes place.
Definitely, it's that community that also is you helped create. I mean, you always said in your lessons that I took with you that the students are the best resource. We as teachers become students, but we help each other, as much or more than the actual training itself. And it created so many connections around the world. People from Brazil, people from so many other countries that have so many different types of education that they brought to the ukulele learning environment. And as a fellow collaborator with James and a musician, what do you think is missing with music education today?
Well, I'm on a big kick these days. I think since COVID hit, we're all sort of trying to think deep thoughts and just figure out things that we maybe haven't been looking at very closely. So my line these days is I think most of our problems can be solved with greater empathy and greater humility. And I think across the board that is true, but I also think that that's true as a teacher. We often come in, I'm a cello teacher. I have a private studio here. And you often just come in as like some kind of authority, but there's so much to be learned if you just take that humble approach. And then I also try in my own way to be empathetic by creating a pedagogy that suits every student individually. So I have a different kind of situation than James in that I'm able to just be one-on-one with people and tailor their repertoire, their learning, my teaching approaches to whatever it is they need.
And how was it to be with James on this journey of creating the James Hill Ukulele Initiative?
Yeah, how was that?
Well, how personal do you want us to get? No, just kidding. I've always really admired James as a person and as a teacher. I think one of the things that has attracted me to him is his passion for teaching, because the performance thing, it's a bit of it's a bit insular, it's a bit of an ego thing, but to have an equal passion, I would say, equal, maybe even more, bigger passion for teaching is, it's just been very inspiring to me. And I think it makes me appreciate him more. It makes me see his values more. And it's just a great compatibility for me. I think, behind the scenes, it means like I'm cooking a lot of meals and I'm looking after Alder a lot. And we always sort of approach every project like this as like a family business, and we all have our role to play. And I'm so delighted that he's doing something that I think is so important for the world, and not just like building a new video game or something like that. Like it's easy to help out when I can see that it really is helping to change lives and to bring music to more people.
I mean, even just building the Jehui pedagogy, and you built the ukulele in the classroom series with Chalmers Doan. Sorry, that
you
name.
got it.
Will, I don't know.
It's a mouthful.
Yes. How is it to work with him and to create all of this new material?
Well, Chalmers has always been.
He just had a birthday.
He did just have
2
a birthday.
days ago.
Yeah. So
Happy birthday, Chalmers.
happy birthday to
Happy
him.
birthday.
To the the godfather of Canadian ukulele. He's just 15 minutes down the road, and a big part of the reason that we live in this part of Canada is because he's 15 minutes down the road. And in collaborating with him on these books, I fell in love with this area, and we've been here now for over a decade. So he's had a huge influence on our own lives, and getting to know he and his wife has been one of our great joys, and they're good friends with Alder.
His
and
wife is amazing.
Jean
She's
is
one of the wisest people I've ever met in my life. She's
very amazing lady.
Speaking of supporting the husband's endeavor, incredible.
So, and also being a musician and a teacher in her own right. So working with him has always been, I've always felt that it was this amazing intergenerational experience, because I remember when I talked to Chalmers when I was a teenager. I first met him when I was 16. And then, he was always very supportive. He liked the way I was playing the ukulele, and he thought that was cool. But then we'd talk on the phone just occasionally. And I remember one of our early conversations, he said, I'm willing to tell you everything we did wrong. And I was like, whoa, like, okay, lay it on me. Because what he was saying was, I'm over it. Like, I'm not, my ego's not in this anymore. And I think that's what needs to happen for proper intergenerational work, which is so important, because you get the wisdom of experience with that fire and passion and creativity of youth that says nothing's impossible. Those two alone don't get a lot done, but together they are just an incredible force, right? But the problem is ego. And you often hear people saying, oh, well, that skips a generation. The reason it skips a generation is because you can't collaborate one generation back. There's not enough time for people to cool down and just get their own ego out of the picture.
Or even just have a vantage point. Like, it just takes some time sometimes to see how things unfold, too. Sure.
I think there's some very practical reasons why some things and some collaborations work better across generations. And so that for me, that's always been one good example of that. So that was it, really. I mean, we'd sit across the table from each other over these manuscripts and drafts and ideas, and always have the ukes there playing. And I would just say, here's what I think we should do. And he would say, well, based on my lifetime of experience, here's what's not going to work. And we just go back and forth like that in this constant tug of war between what was possible and what he could see based on his amazing sort of bird's eye view of pedagogy. So in that way, it was always a really very fruitful collaboration.
And would you say there were things that he brought to the table that you never would have thought of yourself?
Oh yeah, like all the time, but not necessarily in the sense of, here's a technique, or here's a skill, or here's a chord that we should teach. It was more like in terms of the psychology of how it was going to land. You talk about one thing that Chalmers says often, which is the students will learn more from each other than they ever will from the teacher. Well, that's just like a lightning bolt of an idea if you've never heard that before. And as soon as you hear it, it's true, but it takes a real wisdom and the vantage point of time to realize that, and to formulate it into a sentence where you can then tell somebody else that in a way that they'll understand. Things like that. Things like, don't put everything in the book. I'm like, what? Everything has to be in the book. We have to tell people how to do everything. And he says, no. Don't put everything in the book. You have to leave room for the teacher to be the expert sometimes. And it's like, oh yeah. Because if the student just looks at the book and says, well, we've all had those teachers who just read out of the book, and it doesn't create a feeling of respect for the teacher because they're just reading down from the top left-hand corner to the bottom right-hand corner. He says, leave room for the teacher. Don't put every answer in the book. Those kinds of things are just, they're so valuable, and there's only one way to get them, and that's, to live through them.
And I just want to pause on what you're saying right now, which is it's really mind-boggling when you think of who Chalmers Doan is, the pioneer of ukulele in Canada, who brought ukulele to Nova Scotia, to pretty much even out west,
even to Hawaii.
Wow, yeah. and Hawaii is considered the birthplace of ukulele, and he's the one saying, hey, you need to give room for other teachers to bring their expertise. Like, just thinking about the humility, the humbleness that he brings is amazing.
Yeah, it's really amazing. And it's like I said, the minute you hear it, it's true, but you don't always get there yourself, and you need somebody like that to guide you.
Definitely. And I want to touch back on what Anne was saying, the wives who support the husbands, and it could be the other way around in other cases, of course. But this is one of the focuses that I like to put in Changemakers, especially when I make my historical shows, where there are so many people behind the scenes that are supporting the person who is kind of spearheading a movement. And so I could really see how you and Anne are working so well together. Perhaps both of you are doing different things, though. I want to also ask you about your cello and ukulele duo and how that all started. But it's amazing to see. Anne, would you mind telling us a bit about how you and James met and how your duo started?
Oh, yeah. I hired him for a gig. That's how we first met.
That's
so
true,
I was the boss in the beginning.
Yeah.
And he was recommended to me, and I decided to hire him for this like background string trio or something like that. At a
bank, I think.
It was the credit union.
Yeah,
no question.
Yeah. You should have got married in a credit union then.
Yeah, that would have been all right.
Yeah, money's not our strong suit.
Did you have an experience with a certain student that you saw? It could have been an adult, could have been a child who fought to learn an instrument or ukulele, despite all odds, where their family situation was on the rocks, or something in their life was not working out at all, but they still fought through it. Have you had those experiences?
Yeah. I mean, we get that with ukulele oftentimes because the instrument is so accessible, both from like a musical standpoint and also just an economic standpoint. It's a very affordable instrument. So we do get students who wouldn't otherwise maybe be able to afford a cello or a violin. But in terms of that like social angle on things, probably the most experience comes from Anne's work with Sistema New Brunswick, for example. Did you want to say a word about that and how that's had an impact on the way you do things?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think there's no question we are incredibly privileged. And now, again, with recent protests, and it's just coming to the fore, like how really fortunate and privileged we are. And I had never fully accepted, or not accepted, but acknowledged that, I guess. So oftentimes, like just in daily life, we don't often come across families really struggling like that. But I did have the opportunity to work with a wonderful program in Moncton, Sistema New Brunswick. And that is an orchestral program that is modeled off of a program from Venezuela. Maestro Abreu started this incredible, okay, I'm going to put this down, worldwide.
Be careful.
It's a bow. It's dangerous, a bow. he spearheaded this incredible worldwide phenomenon, essentially. So the premise is the kids have this immersion after school. In Moncton, it worked as an after school program. And one of the reasons, speaking of like synergy and overlap, is, you know, parents who are working 2, 3, 4 jobs, they can't always afford daycare or afford after school care. So Sistema comes in, they screen kids, they accept the ones that are in the greatest need, and they offer this incredible program that's way better than any private program that, you know, the rich kids can afford. And it's this community of learning music. So it's this immersion, it's this community, and they are playing incredible music within the first few years of playing. And it's so exciting and it's so incredible. I was only there for 1 year because, you know, this guy, we were kind of back and forth, and it didn't end up working for our family situation. But I would urge any of your listeners to check out that program. So Sistema New Brunswick is the one closest home here in the Maritimes, but I know there's a Sistema Toronto, there's St. James Academy in Vancouver. There's several programs that are based on this type of teaching to specifically target the kids who would otherwise just not be serviced through music. So it's pretty exciting stuff, and I was happy to be a part of it for a little while anyway.
That's spectacular. The Venezuela program that you're mentioning, I believe that many of the students that are coming out of there are actually going and continuing their music careers in orchestras. And
they are, well, their poster child is Gustavo Dudamel. So he's now conducting the LA Phil, and the man that we worked with in Moncton, his name is Tony Delgado, and he was also sort of part of that crew with Gustavo. But I mean, not only conductors, but also like you look in the orchestra seats around the world, it's a lot of these kids from Venezuela, and it's because of this immersion. Like, this is the other thing about, so I teach principally classical music, a classical training for my students, because I feel like it's a very rigorous and very in-depth approach. But the challenge of that is that people aren't hearing classical music anymore in their everyday life. They're not exposed to it. Whereas Maestro Abreu's genius is that they are, like, these kids, they're like singing these Bartok pieces in solfege, and like, it's just incredible. They're totally immersed, which means that they can embody this music in a way that's really authentic. And it's almost impossible right now when everyone is, you know, listening to pop music and trying to play a little bit of cello on the side.
But what's amazing about the immersion, and I think what any teacher can sort of pause and reflect on, is that it's very much like an immersion French program, which Alder's doing right now. Like, you just go and you live the thing. It's not like you go to school in English and then they give you a handout that says, okay, now go home and learn these 10 French words. Because that doesn't work. That doesn't, we all know that doesn't work. You have to live, breathe, dream the topic in order to really absorb it. And yet we approach music like that so often. So, like, I live my life totally separate from music, and then on Wednesdays after school I go to my piano lesson. And
for half an hour.
For half an hour. And somehow we're mystified when that doesn't work so well. Like, whereas a system like Sistema, those kids are just living and breathing it for hours a day. They're there for 3 hours every day,
Monday to Friday. Yeah.
And they don't even take the instruments home. It's not like a thing like, okay, now go home and practice. No. You're just going to live in this. You're going to live and breathe it for 3 hours a day. And that's much more powerful, especially in a social environment, than saying, go home and learn these 10 French words on your own. And anyway, so I think that's something we can all learn from.
Definitely. And what do you think is the impact on the social and emotional skills that children can develop from that kind of thing?
Huge.
It's just through the roof. I mean, music teaches you absolutely everything you need to know about life. Like, well, from empathy, cooperation, personal expression, discipline, relatability, creativity, trying to come up with your own personal interpretations. People who are interested in composition, there's that whole side of it too. Really, like, I think music is so special in that it can teach you absolutely any skill that you need. And I find, well, and it's funny, my studio right now is all adult students, just for whatever reason, just at this point in my teaching. And I often find that it's a bit of a therapy session. Like, adults come in with all of this baggage, and they have these things that they can do and they can't do, or they want to do and don't want to do. And then it becomes this way of just like navigating through and giving them this confidence, this positive reinforcement, this essentially like a champion. Like, you can do this, you're strong enough, you're smart enough, you're fast enough, you can do this. And I think it's no different for kids. Like, having a positive adult in their life who believes in them and who can help them to become a better person is just so crucial.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Definitely. And James, you were just mentioning about how in connection with what Anne was bringing up about the orchestras, where if you're just going about your day without bringing music into your life other than the lessons, it connects to another question that I wanted to ask of, what do you think is the importance of classical training versus ear training?
Well, I think that's like saying, what's the importance of the left hand versus the right hand? I think they're complementary skills. One focuses on one set of skills and one focuses on another set of skills. I think classical training gives you just the mechanics and the sort of musical logic that can really come in handy. And training by ear, or like a more folk music approach to training, a more oral tradition, gives you the more of the feeling and the life and the creativity and the spark behind it. But we've all seen what just one of those sounds like or looks like on its own. The most compelling thing is where you have both working in tandem. It's like having both sides of the brain working on a problem simultaneously. We know that is the best way to go. And I think that's very similar to a sort of a conservatory upbringing versus a what did you call it, more folkloric or ear training background.
Please support Changemakers Without Borders. Give a like, write a comment, send it and share it to friends, and even write a review on Apple Podcasts or Podchasers. This is on community radio, and the vision is to bring more education and more knowledge to people who want to be